Chapter 13, Attack at Night. Chief Colleague called in a police sonograph to take down Ragu's statement. As Mr. Dele nodded to Ragu, the Daisy K's first mate began his story. First, I know nothing about any smuggling of any countrymen into the U.S. I didn't join the group that was planning a kidnapping. But you must believe me, I did not know until it was too late who the victim was going to be. But you know the kidnapping is a criminal act, said Chief Colleague. What was your part in it? Very small one, Ragu insisted. I ran errands. Once a man came to a ship and gave me a letter. He told me to deliver it to the Bayport Hotel. What was the name of the man who came to the Daisy K? Chief Colleague broke in. And what did he look like? I do not know his name, Ragu said. He was short and had brown hair. The man at the hotel was called Mr. Lewis. Frank and Joe exchanged knowing glances. Mr. Lewis was probably the L mentioned in the note Chet had found attached to the downed pigeon. How did you expect to get paid for this job if you didn't know the name of the man who hired you? Frank asked. He promised to pay me with a red ruby ring. It was left in a secret place, Ragu replied. The only time I wore it was when I came to your house to take the falcon. After that, I was afraid and sold the ring. You know about that. Frank confirmed this. Then Joe said, Who hired you to steal our falcon? I don't know that either, Ragu replied. I got a phone call at my rooming house. An unfamiliar voice said if I could steal the falcon, I would receive another payment. What part do the pigeons play in the racket? Frank asked the prisoner. They carry messages, but I don't know where they go, and I don't know what the note says. Chief Colleague turned to Mr. Delhay and asked him if he had any further questions. He had none. Frank spoke up. Ragu, tell us about Captain Flaunt and his activities. He's more than a fishing boat captain, isn't he? Ragu pursed his lips. He looked at Mr. Delhay, then settled back on his cot. I don't know much about the captain, he said. I have only worked for him for a short time. No amount of persuasion could elect any further information from the first mate. It was evident that Kane had learned that the crew member of the Daisy K was afraid of the captain. I guess we found out all we can tonight, said Chief Colleague when the visitors had left the cell. On the way back to the Hardys' home, Mr. Delhay was silent. Just before they turned into the driveway, he asked, How will you boys proceed now? When Captain Font hears of Ragu's arrest, he may make trouble. We'll have to take that chance, Joe replied. Then he snapped his fingers. Frank, how about you and I disguise ourselves and join a fishing boat party on the Daisy K to do some detecting? Right. Joe decided to take the Falcon indoors for the night. Ragu's arrest might mean trouble, Mr. Delhay had said. At any rate, the smugglers would probably be determined to get the hawk. Mr. Delhay followed the boys through the kitchen door and into the living room, where Mrs. Hardy and Aunt Gertrude were reading. While Joe took the hawk to the boys' room, Frank introduced the visitor to the woman and Mrs. Hardy. Mr. Delhay, it's much too late for you to set back for Washington. We should like to have you spend the night with us. I'm grateful for your thoughtfulness, the man declared. Thank you, I will accept. By 11 o'clock, the boys and their guests had found it impossible to keep from yawning, despite the interesting conversation about the different customs between India and the United States. Mrs. Hardy suggested that they retire. I shall wait for my husband, she said. He'll be back about midnight. The boys were pleased to hear that their father was coming, and would have liked to talk to him as soon as he arrived, but they were very sleepy, and also they had to arise early for the fishing trip. They kissed their mother and Aunt Gertrude good night, then escorted their visitor to the guest room. The boys provided him with bedclothes, a robe, and slippers. The three said good night, and within half an hour, Frank and Joe were sound asleep. But sometime later, Frank awoke with a start. He glanced at the luminous dial of their alarm clock. It was almost 2 o'clock. Joe awakened a moment later and called from his bed. What's the matter? Is it time to get up? No, it's only 2 o'clock. But did you hear someone moving around downstairs? Frank asked. No. An intruder could be in the house, Frank mused. Mom and Dad would have set the burglar alarm before going to bed. Joe got up and tiptoed across the floor. He opened He opened the door and listened for several seconds. Not a sound, he reported. That's good, Frank replied, stretching and relaxing again. Now let's go back to sleep. Joe closed the bedroom door and walked over to the side window and opened it wider. As he did, he saw something moving in the lawn. Frank, come here, his brother whispered. What's up? Frank asked. Someone's down at the edge of the lawn, Joe said, over by the hedge. Let's throw a spotlight on him, Frank suggested. The Hardys had a bright spotlight under the eaves at each side of the house, a precaution, occasionally, by too many prowlers interested in the detective's work. The lights were controlled from a switch in the upper and lower halls. Okay, Joe agreed. Frank dashed to the room to snap on the second-floor light switch. Instantly, the front lawn was flooded with light. Outlined against the hedge was a hooded figure, with one arm raised above his head. In that position, he froze for a moment, evidently blinded by the glare. Frank had rejoined his brother at the window. Looks as if he's going to throw something, he whispered. Before Joe could make a reply, the hooded figure hurled a large round object straight towards them. Both boys jumped back. The man missed his mark, and the object clashed into the side window of the living room directly below them. Instantly, the burglar alarm chimed. Then was drowned out by a deafening roar. The spotlight went out, and the Hardys' home shook on its foundation. Frank and Joe were flung violently to the floor.